Rain moved across the city like a slow marching band, drums on concrete, cymbals on steel, and for once Darius didn't hurry. He had a plastic bag of groceries clutched to his chest, rice, eggs, one apple his daughter loved, and a work badge that buzzed him into places where his face never seemed to belong. The bridge rose ahead like a gray rib cage over the river, and he took it because it was quiet, because quiet helped him rehearse tomorrow, the rent plea, the extra shift request, the smile that asked for mercy without dropping his pride. He was halfway across when he saw her, thin coat, bare hands on the rail, hair plastered by rain, shoes pointed where the water wanted to swallow her name. His throat closed. No one else, just the steady hiss of the storm, the low growl of a distant truck, and the tiny sound of the bag slipping in his fingers. "Don't jump," he said, voice gentler than the weather. He held his hands out like a referee to life. "I know you don't know me, but please don't." She didn't turn. The river took the sky in its black mouth and chewed on it. Darius walked closer, step by careful step. He remembered how his daughter Naya flinched in her sleep when a siren passed. He remembered the landlord's knuckles on the door like a clock he couldn't stop. "If you think there's no one left, that's not true," he said. "I'm someone. I'm right here." The wind shoved his jacket open, clung to his shirt, sighed through the guardrails like a warning. "I've been where your mind is," he added softly. "That place is all corners and no doors." Her shoulders shook. "I can't do it anymore," she whispered, a sound smaller than the rain. "Every day I am not enough for someone I'm supposed to please." She leaned forward an inch that turned his bones to glass. Darius placed the groceries down slowly, as if that single apple had to survive to prove tomorrow could still happen. "I'm Darius," he said, "and I once told my daughter that if everything else breaks, we still have minutes. We can survive them one by one. We only ever need one more." He moved close enough to see her fingers whitening. Rings left faint, pale circles. She looked young, older, both. Grief rearranged the face until age meant nothing. "You don't know what they took from me," she said. "I am a mistake everywhere I go." "I know what they tried to take from me," he answered. "They told me a black man with a mop is a shadow. They told me my kid should lower her voice when she asks questions. They told me kindness is weakness. They were wrong about every single one." He offered his hand, palm open, nothing in it but warmth the rain couldn't rinse away. "You don't have to prove anything tonight. You only have to stay." She turned her head a fraction. Her eyes were swollen with the kind of crying that leaves salt maps on your skin. "Why would you care?" she asked. "Because somebody once stood between me and the worst thing I could have done," he said. "A stranger. He just sat on the curb with me until my storm ran out of words. I promised him I'd pay it forward. I still owe." The wind pushed hard. The bridge hummed with the weight of a semi rolling by, shaking metal into a low groan. Darius stepped in, slow enough to honor fear, quick enough to beat despair's timing, and touched the cold back of her hand. "Give me your name so I can say it to tomorrow," he said. "Names are anchors." Her fingers fluttered. I don't want to be found," she said, and then she slipped. It was an inch, a heartbeat, the kind of slip you don't come back from. Darius lunged, his palm locked around her wrist. Pain shot up his arm. She cried out, one foot dangling over the black mouth of the river, the other scraping for grip. He wedged his hip into the rail and hauled, every muscle bargaining wit. Gravity. The rain made them both slick, and the city felt miles away from the small circle of breath they shared. "I got you," he grunted. "I got you. Stay with me." She sobbed, panic cracking open. "Let go," she begged. "Better for everyone." "Not for Nia," he said, surprising himself with how quickly his daughter's name arrived, a flare in the night. "She needs to wake up tomorrow and know that strangers still believe in strangers." He adjusted his stance, found the groove where the rail met his ribs and pulled. She rose an inch. He pulled again, teeth clenched, shoulders screaming. Another inch. Finally, with a raw sound that was part prayer, part threat to the dark, he dragged her over the rail and collapsed with her on the wet walkway. They lay there panting, the rain washing old promises off their faces. He shrugged out of his jacket and wrapped it around her. She was shaking so hard his hands shook too. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry." He didn't say it was okay. He said, "You're here," because sometimes survival is the only forgiveness that matters. The groceries had tumbled, the apple rolled in a bright, stubborn circle and rested near her knee. It made her laugh, a shocked, broken, grateful sound, as if the world had just coughed up a joke to prove it could still be kind. "Come on," Darius said, rising to his knees. "There's a 24-hour diner 2 blocks down. We can sit where the coffee never ends and the lights are rude to the dark." She hesitated, eyes flicking to the river again, then to his face. "I don't have money," she said. "I got you," he repeated and helped her to her feet. They walked slowly, 2 soaked figures stitched together by a shared minute. At the end of the bridge, she stopped. "I should tell you," she said, voice unsteady. "People might come looking." Darius nodded. "That's okay. I'll still sit with you." In the diner, warmth climbed their sleeves like a rescue. The waitress took one look at their faces and poured without asking. The woman cupped the mug, as if heat could teach her how to be long again. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me." Darius shook his head. "For staying," he corrected gently. The rain softened against the windows. The city exhaled the kind of tired you only hear after midnight. He reached for the sugar, then stopped. "I never asked," he said. "What do I call you?" She stared into the coffee, then lifted her eyes. Something steadied inside them, as if a doorway had finally appeared at the end of a hall full of corners. She told him her name. Darius didn't flinch because names were just anchors like he'd said. Only later would that name ripple through his life. Would he learn that the river had almost stolen someone the world paid attention to? For now he pressed it into the silence between them like a seed. Morning light never asked permission before sneaking through thin curtains, and for Darius it meant the same thing every day. Another chance to stretch what little he had. The apartment smelled faintly of instant coffee and damp shoes drying by the radiator. His daughter, Nia, sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring with broken crayons, her tongue poking from the corner of her mouth in concentration. He watched her for a moment, memorizing the small miracle of her presence, before the stack of bills on the table dragged his gaze back. The red stamps across envelopes glared like open wounds. Rent overdue, utilities pending. One more week, the landlord had said, knocking on the door with a rhythm too confident, too certain of power. Darius tied his work boots, each lace pulled tight with a sigh, and grabbed the same faded jacket he'd wrapped around the woman on the bridge. She had left before dawn, slipping away with nothing but a whispered thank you and the echo of her name. He didn't know why it lingered like a secret in his chest. He only knew he couldn't forget it. At the bus stop, strangers leaned away as though poverty were contagious. He heard the muffled chuckle of 2 men in suits, another one working 2 jobs and still behind. Why bother? Darius lowered his eyes, but not his pride. His daughter deserved better, and that meant swallowing shame until it hardened into resolve. At his first job, the warehouse echoed with clanging pallets and the gruff commands of supervisors who saw skin before skill. "Faster, Darius," one barked. "Your people are good at heavy lifting, right?" Laughter trickled across the floor like oil. He said nothing, moved faster, but inside a storm tightened. By evening, he swapped uniforms, trading steel-toed boots for the plain shirt of a janitor in a downtown office building. The hallways smelled of bleach and ambition. Suits swept past without seeing him. To them, he was background noise, a mop in human form. Yet when a secretary dropped her stack of papers, he bent to help. She snatched them back, muttering, "Don't smudge them." Respect was rationed here, handed out by wealth and withheld from those who cleaned its mess. Nia waited for him at the corner daycare. Her shoes were scuffed, her backpack too small. "Daddy, the teacher says I talk too much," she confessed, eyes wide with guilt. Darius knelt, cupping her cheek. "Don't ever stop asking questions. Your voice is worth hearing." He remembered his own childhood, teachers who assumed silence meant obedience rather than the crushing weight of being ignored. He wouldn't let Nia inherit that silence. That night, as he reheated rice and split the apple into careful slices, his phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. He hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was soft but urgent. "This is me, the woman from the bridge." I wanted to thank you again. I'm still here because of you." His breath caught. He leaned against the counter, closing his eyes. "I'm glad you stayed," he said simply. She promised she would repay him someday, her words trembling between hope and guilt. He wanted to believe her, but life had taught him not to expect miracles. Days blurred into weeks. The promise faded like graffiti in the rain. She was gone, leaving only her name echoing in his memory. The bills remained. The landlord's knocks grew sharper. One afternoon, a notice slapped against the door. Eviction imminent. Darius held it in his hands while Nia slept, her small chest rising and falling like a fragile rhythm he couldn't afford to lose. The world didn't applaud men like him for kindness. It mocked them. At work, when he offered his lunch to a coworker who forgot theirs, another sneered, "How can you give away food when you can't feed yourself?" He smiled faintly, hiding the sting, because dignity was sometimes quieter than anger. Still, in the hollow hours after midnight, he wondered if saving that woman had mattered. Had it changed anything beyond that night? Was he any closer to the life his daughter deserved? Yet when he looked at Nia, at the way she clutched his hand as though it anchored her to safety, he knew the answer. Kindness mattered because it kept the heart alive, even when the world tried to starve it. One evening he returned home to find the apple core still on the counter, browned and shriveled. He almost threw it away, then stopped. It reminded him of that night on the bridge, of laughter through tears, of a life pulled back from the edge. He placed it gently in the trash, whispering to himself, "One more day, just one more." But outside, fate was already moving pieces he couldn't see. For while he struggled in silence, the name she had given him was stirring circles of power far beyond his neighborhood. And soon, the man who thought he was invisible would learn that nothing done out of pure kindness is ever truly forgotten. The restaurant glittered like a world cut from glass, every chandelier dripping with ligs. Every table dressed in white linen so crisp, it looked forbidden to touch. Darius pushed open the side door, his mop bucket squeaking like an unwelcome guest. He kept his head down, the same way he always did when working these upscale nights. For men like him, invisibility was safer than being noticed. Yet even silence could not hide the ache in his back from 2 shifts or the hollow in his stomach from skipping dinner so Nia could have seconds. He had just bent to gather a napkin left on the floor when laughter cracked through the air. At the corner table, a man in a tailored suit, silver watch glinting beneath the lights, pointed at him. "Look at that, cleaner trash trying to blend in with marble," he sneered. His companions chuckled, wine swirling in crystal glasses. Darius froze, napkin in hand, every instinct telling him to swallow it down. Still, the words found his daughter's face in his memory, the way she asked last night, "Daddy, why don't they respect you?" Maybe if he scrubbed harder, he'd polish himself into something worth looking at, another voice added, soft enough to pretend it was a joke but loud enough to wound. Laughter rolled again. Darius straightened, shoulders tight, but his eyes stayed calm. If he erupted, he'd lose this job too, and Naya's shoes already pinched her toes. From the corner of his vision, he saw her, his little girl, standing near the doorway. The daycare had closed early, and he had picked her up before heading here, promising she could sit quietly in the staff room. But she had slipped out, curious, and now she stood watching as strangers mocked her father, her small fists clenched, her lip trembling. He wanted to shield her, to erase this moment from her memory, but he couldn't. The humiliation cut deeper because her eyes saw it all. He knelt quickly, whispered, "It's okay, baby. Some people don't see right." She blinked back tears, nodded, but her shoulders drooped. For the first time, Darius felt anger not for himself, but for the way cruelty tried to teach his daughter shame. Then the air shifted, the restaurant door opened, and a hush followed like a shadow. He looked up, and there she was, the woman from the bridge. No soaked coat this time, no trembling hands on steel rails. She walked in draped in quiet authority, her hair shining, her dress tailored, every step drawing the attention of the room as if gravity bent toward her. People rose slightly from their chairs, nodding, whispering her name with respect. Darius's breath caught. His chest felt heavy, like the night she nearly slipped away. She saw him instantly. Her eyes widened, recognition flashing like lightning across a storm. For a heartbeat, she looked exactly as she had that night, raw, fragile. Then the mask of power slid back, composed, steady. The man who had mocked Darius stiffened. His smirk faltered as he noticed how others now straightened in their seats, adjusting ties, smoothing gowns. He pushed back his chair and hurried to greet her, bowing low, words tumbling over themselves. "Miss, welcome. We didn't expect. What an honor." His tone was soaked with deference, the kind he had denied to Darius moments earlier. Darius stood silent, the mop handle warm against his palm. His daughter tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, that's her," she whispered, though she couldn't know. He nodded faintly. Yes, that was her, the woman whose life he'd pulled back from the river. She approached slowly, eyes never leaving his face. In them he saw gratitude unspoken, the weight of a promise she had made. Around them whispers spread like sparks on dry leaves. People asked who he was, why she stared at a janitor as if he mattered. The arrogant man shifted nervously, his earlier cruelty now echoing in his own ears. For a moment the whole room seemed to hang between breaths. Darius fits, felt the mop bucket tilt slightly, water sloshing like a clock ticking. He remembered the apple rolling on the bridge, her broken laugh, the way she whispered her name as though it was both a gift and a burden. And here she was, alive, powerful, standing in the same world that had mocked him minutes before. "Do you know her?" Naya asked softly. Darius swallowed, his throat dry. "Yes, baby," he murmured. "I know her." The man who had insulted him forced a smile, turning toward her. "Don't mind the help," he said quickly, as if trying to erase his cruelty. "We were just—" She lifted a hand, silencing him without a word. Her gaze locked on Darius, steady, unwavering. The restaurant lights glinted off crystal and silver, but in that moment all he saw was the bridge, the rain, and the fragile choice between despair and tomorrow. And he realized with a jolt that the night he thought was only about saving her had just circled back to change his life too. Silence spread through the restaurant like a dropped curtain. Every fork paused, every whisper froze. The woman stepped closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor, each sound commanding more attention than the music drifting from the corner piano. She stopped in front of Darius, her expression soft yet unshakable. For a moment, it felt like only the two of them existed. The janitor with worn shoes, and the woman who once clung to his jacket on a rain-soaked bridge. The man who had mocked Darius earlier tried to recover his confidence. He forced a laugh, gesturing toward the mop. "Surely, miss, you don't want to waste your evening with him. Let the staff stay in their place." His words carried the same venom as before, only now cloaked in nervousness. The tables leaned in, eager for spectacle. She turned her head slowly, and the weight of her gaze struck him silent. "You speak of places," she said, voice calm. "But perhaps you do not understand that dignity is not confined to marble or crystal." Her words were precise, each syllable a mirror reflecting his arrogance back at him. Then, she looked at Darius again. "You once told me names are anchors," she said softly, though the whole room could hear. "You saved mine, and I never forgot." A murmur rolled through the crowd. People exchanged puzzled glances. Who was this janitor? What did she mean? The arrogant man bristled, desperate to regain footing. "With respect, miss, this cleaner has no business standing in circles of influence. If you want him near, let it be to scrub floors, not sit at tables. People here have earned their places." Nia clutched her father's hand, eyes shining with unshed tears. Darius's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had learned long ago that answering cruelty only fed it. Still, the humiliation burned deeper because it unfolded before his daughter. The woman's eyes flashed, her composure edged with steel. "Earned?" she repeated. "Do you measure worth by gold threads in a suit or kindness in a heart? By shoes polished or souls tested?" She let the silence stretch. "Because if we measured by compassion, this man would outshine most of you." A hush heavier than thunder fell. The man's face flushed red. He sputtered, "You don't know him. He's nothing but—" "I know him," she cut in firmly. Her voice carried a finality that silenced even the chandelier's hum. I know he stood on a bridge when no one else would. I know he gave me back my life when I had already decided to let it go. I know he saw a stranger and still called her worthy. That is more than I can say for many who sit here hiding cruelty behind wine glasses. Gasps rippled, heads turned. Someone whispered, She means it. He saved her. The arrogant man's shoulders sagged under the invisible weight of shame. The woman extended her hand toward Darius. Tonight, you don't stand in the shadows. Sit with me. Darius blinked, stunned. He glanced at Nia, who nodded eagerly, pride glowing in her eyes. Slowly, as though afraid it might break the moment, he set the mop aside and took her hand. Her grip was warm, steady, lifting him out of invisibility. She led him across the room, past tables where eyes widened and whispers grew louder, and seated him at her side. The arrogant man half rose, trembling with outrage. This is madness. You can't. He doesn't belong here. Her voice sharpened. What doesn't belong here is arrogance that mocks the very hands that keep these floors clean. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze piercing. Consider this your lesson. Humility cannot be bought, and respect is not yours to ration. The man slumped back, defeated, the room watching as instant karma folded neatly around him. The laughter that once fueled his cruelty was gone, replaced by the cold edge of silence. Darius sat awkwardly, his calloused hands folded on the white linen, his daughter's small fingers laced with his. The cutlery gleamed, the glasses sparkled, but for the first time, he did not feel out of place. He felt seen. He turned to her, words caught in his throat. I don't understand, he whispered. You will, she said gently, in time. For now, just know this. You are not invisible, and neither is your kindness. The piano resumed its quiet song. The restaurant exhaled as though trying to catch up with what had just shifted. But nothing would return to what it was a few minutes before. The janitor had become more than background, and those who once mocked him now sat in silence, their arrogance exposed. And though Darius couldn't yet see the path unfolding, he felt the ground beneath him tilt. The bridge had not been the end of their story. It had only been the beginning. The chandeliers flickered like captured stars, but the true light in the room came from the hush that followed her words. Darius sat stiffly in the chair she had pulled out for him, his work shirt damp with sweat though the air was cool. Nia perched beside him, wide-eyed, legs swinging under the table. Around them, the rich and powerful shifted in their seats, discomfort crawling across their faces. They weren't used to the script flipping this way, where a janitor was honored and their cruelty unmasked. The man who had mocked Darius earlier couldn't bear it. He leaned forward, wine staining the corners of his mouth, voice pitched to break the silence. This is absurd. You cannot possibly compare the worth of a cleaner to men who move markets, build empires, and fund governments. He is nothing, a nobody. His fist struck the table, silverware rattling like frightened bones. The woman beside Darius didn't flinch. Her calm only magnified his anger. Worth is not measured in empires, she said evenly. It is measured in humanity, and tonight, all your wealth could not match what he gave me with empty hands. The man scoffed, desperate now. Then prove it. If he's so worthy, let him speak. Let him show us his brilliance, his pedigree, his polished words, or else admit this charade is only pity dressed up as virtue. He sat back smugly, convinced he had found the trap. The crowd murmured, eager for spectacle again. Darius's heart hammered. He had never stood at podiums, never rehearsed speeches meant to impress. His world was buckets, time cards, lullabies for his daughter in a cracked voice. He shook his head slightly, whispering, I don't belong here. But Nia tugged his sleeve. Daddy, she whispered, just tell them the truth. Her small voice was steady, her eyes braver than he felt. Something inside him broke open, not weakness, but the refusal to keep shrinking. He rose slowly. The linen tablecloth brushed against his knees. The crystal glasses gleamed like watchers. He looked at the faces around him, some mocking, some curious, some unsettled. "I don't have polished words," he began, his voice low but carrying. "I don't own towers or companies. I own calluses." He lifted his hands slightly, palms roughened by labor. Hands that scrub floors so my daughter can eat. Hands that held someone back from falling because I couldn't watch another life drown. If that makes me nothing, then I will gladly be nothing. The room stilled. He hadn't raised his voice, but the honesty cracked through the marble air sharper than thunder. The woman placed her hand over his. "This is not nothing," she said. "This is everything." She turned to the crowd. "You asked me to prove his worth? He already did. He saved mine. Without him, I would not be standing here." Her words struck like a bell, reverberating against every crystal and gilded frame. The arrogant man's face drained of color. Guests began to whisper, not about Darius this time, but about him. The story of his cruelty at the table, his arrogance, his attempt to belittle someone who had risked his own life for another, spread like fire. His allies shifted away, eyes cold, their silence cutting deeper than mockery. He had lost not just the moment, but the respect he prized most. Instant karma had arrived, swift and undeniable. Then she turned to Darius. "I offer you no charity," she said firmly, loud enough for all to hear. "What I offer is partnership. You know what it is to live at the edges, to see what wealth ignores. I need people beside me who understand resilience, not privilege. Will you join me?" Darius's throat tightened. He wanted to laugh, to refuse, to hide. "I'm not educated like you," he said, shaking his head. "I barely keep the rent from swallowing us whole. I wouldn't know what to do." She leaned closer, her voice soft but fierce. "You knew what to do on that bridge. You knew what to do when they mocked you. That is wisdom no university can teach." The table waited, breathless. Darius looked down at Nia. She squeezed his hand, her small voice whispering, "Say yes, Daddy. You deserve it." And in that moment, he realized the offer wasn't just for him. It was for her future. For the little girl who had watched her father humiliated and would now watch him honored. His shoulders straightened. He nodded once. "Yes," he said, the word trembling but strong. A ripple of surprise, then applause rose from the edges of the room. Not everyone clapped, but enough did to shift the air. The arrogant man shoved back his chair and stormed out, his shadow shrinking as he left. Darius remained standing, not as a janitor tonight, but as a man who had finally been seen. The chandeliers gleamed brighter, as if even the light approved. The weeks that followed felt like stepping into another world. Darius still woke at dawn, still tied his boots, still packed Nia's lunch with careful hands, but now he walked with a strange new weight in his chest, a mixture of disbelief and hope. The woman he had saved from the bridge, Amelia, as she had introduced herself that night, had kept her promise. She didn't just offer him words, she opened doors he never even knew existed. For the first time, Darius entered offices through the front door, not the side. People greeted him by name, not by uniform. At first he resisted, feeling like an imposter in rooms filled with polished shoes and pressed suits. But Amelia stood beside him, reminding him softly, "You belong, not because of wealth, but because of worth." Nia blossomed too. At school, where she once sat quietly in the back, teachers began to notice her sharp mind and endless questions. Amelia arranged for tutoring, not as charity but as investment. "Your daughter is a light," she said. "The world must not dim her." For Nia, who had seen her father mocked and overlooked, the change was like a window opening. She held her head higher, spoke with more courage. Yet Darius never forgot the bridge, the rain, the night he almost lost hope himself. He carried it like a scar, invisible to the world. When Amelia asked him to join her at events, he hesitated, nervous among the elite who measured lives by money. But each time, when someone raised an eyebrow at his essence, she silenced them with truth. "This man saved me. Without him, none of this would matter." The whispers that followed were no longer about his lack, but about their blindness. One evening, Amelia invited him and Nia to a gathering in a grand hall. The chandeliers shone brighter than the stars, the marble floors stretched endlessly. Darius felt small at first, clutching Nia's hand. But when people turned to him, curious, he didn't shrink. He remembered the restaurant, the laughter, the shame, and the moment he stood and spoke truth. That memory steadied him. As the night deepened, a guest approached Amelia sneering. "You're making quite the spectacle," elevating a janitor as if he were a peer. The old arrogance was back, dripping from his tone. Darius braced for humiliation, but Amelia only smiled faintly. "You call it spectacle. I call it justice." Then she gestured toward Darius. "Go on, tell him what you told me." Darius took a breath. His voice was quiet but carried through the hall. "I am not ashamed of my work. I scrubbed floors to feed my daughter. I lifted others when no one lifted me. If that makes me less in your eyes, then perhaps your eyes need changing." The man faltered, words collapsing into silence. Around them, people nodded, some applauded, and in that moment, Darius realized he was no longer just surviving, he was teaching. His story had become a mirror for others, forcing them to confront their own hearts. Later that night, as he walked home with Nia asleep against his shoulder, he passed the bridge again. The river moved beneath, dark and restless. He stopped, remembering the night when despair almost won. The rain was gone, the sky clear, but the memory pressed close. He looked down at Nia's peaceful face, then at the water below. He whispered into the night, "Don't jump." The words weren't for Amelia anymore. They were for anyone standing where she had stood, for anyone who felt invisible, worthless, forgotten. He knew now that life could still surprise you, that kindness could circle back in ways no one expected. The wind brushed across his face, gentle this time, almost like an answer. He tightened his grip on his daughter, stepped off the bridge, and walked toward tomorrow. The lesson remained simple, powerful, unshakable. Respect everyone, because you never know whose hand might save you, or whose life you might save with your own.